The water and sewer infrastructure in Toronto is crumbling, and today a study conducted by university professors says all three levels of government must change what they're doing to ensure there are safe and reliable systems for residents. We go now to CTV's Desmond Brown at City Hall. And Desmond, this is something we've known for some time now.
That's right, Tom. And the study says that the provincial and federal governments have to provide more funding, not just for the City of Toronto, but for every municipality around the GTA.
We're all aware of our aging water and sewer systems. During the winter months, we see at least one water main break a day. But a private report released today says the situation is worse than we thought it was all over the Greater Toronto area.
We are moving really into an area that not too many of us would like to see. There is increased leakage in the system. There is always a pipe bursting here or there with direct and indirect impact on the system. And also our rate of replacing our water and wastewater assets is far behind what we should be doing.
The one-month study was conducted by the Residential and Civil Construction Alliance of Ontario. It says provincial and federal grants for water and sewer systems in the GTA have virtually dried up.
What's stopping them is the politics that is around the issue of asset management, especially when it comes to providing funding to the systems.
Earlier this year, the City of Toronto raised water rates by 10.8% and by 9% in each subsequent year until 2012. This was done to help pay for the water and sewer infrastructure backlog. But Trent University economics professor Harry Kitchen says a better solution would be meters on every household.
If you're undercharging for water, which is actually what's happening everywhere, if you're undercharging for water, people overconsume. If you overconsume, you have to have larger treatment plants.
The report also says that most of the infrastructure is operating beyond its useful life. And in Toronto, 20% of the water mains are more than 80 years old.
And I'm live here at City Hall with University of Toronto professor Tamir El-Darabi. Now, Professor, in your study, you've said that provincial and federal funding has virtually dried up to the cities. How has this contributed to the situation that we're in right now?
Well, of course, before the cities were very dependent on provincial and federal fundings, and when these were downloaded to the cities, they didn't have much of a plan to cope with the deterioration of infrastructure, and as such, our infrastructure is deteriorating very sharply without these funding. The recent introduction of full cost pricing by the province and the cities is helping, but you have to remember that water is a special commodity. It's a commodity that everybody consumes, and hence they should pay for it, but it's also a public commodity that's related to public health. And so the federal and provincial government should contribute into the funding to the extent that they help first reduce the effect of deferred maintenance. We have pipes in Toronto and older cities in Ontario that's older than 100 years or 80 years old. And the second area of funding that the government needs to come up with is to provide funding to help municipalities plan for the life cycle cost of their infrastructure, maintain their facilities through infusion of knowledge and long-term planning. It's some of the best investments that governments can present to the municipalities.
Now, you said that there was a ray of hope here, that you were getting through to the engineers who worked at the different levels of government, the provincial and federal governments, but that the politicians are getting in the way.
I think this is the best thing that I learned through the study, is that every time I met with the engineers, I was not only impressed with their credentials and their knowledge, but their enthusiasm and the amount of work that they are handling. Sadly enough, the lack of a vision and leadership and the long-term policy and the existence of a lot of politics is just leaving them short of money and putting out fires all over the place. It is a public long-term, sustainable policy that would emphasize performance measures and very realistic performance measures, long-term planning, coordinating planning, and the use of best knowledge available to us. And most of all, sustainable, clear, responsible, and transparent funding is what we need.
But how do we get the message across to these decision makers, to these politicians? How do they do it here at City Hall, or how do we do it as citizens of the city?
I think the first thing is that we need to know the size of the problem that we are facing. And I think your report here and your existence with us today is one step toward informing the public before it is too late to fix the infrastructure. Second, the fundamental need is that we get the infrastructure issues out of public politics into public policy. And I think everybody of us should be aware that if we don't pay for it now, we will pay later and much more money. So we, in a good democracy like the Canada, and with people who are savvy with the environment and the internet, should take care of our assets and bring the issues to the politicians and make it an election issue. But my recommendation is that it should not be a short-term election issue. What the politicians or the public policy makers should do is to establish a policy and reduce the public politics element of it.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes. And that was Professor Tamir El-Darabi of the University of Toronto, reporting live from City Hall. I'm Desmond Brown. Now back to you.